This is the Sony A6300, and it was a massive powerhouse when it got released in 2016. But many newer cameras were released since then, like the Sony A7 IV. But after using the Sony A6300 for over 3 years now, I can tell you, I really hate it. But I'm also in love with it. And let me be honest, the price of the A6300 dropped massively. So let's talk about if the Sony A6300 is still worth buying in 2022 and why it's the best camera for every filmmaker, a beginner and even later on. Let me first check the time. Time to start. Hey, welcome to my channel. My name is Fab and I'm a full-time filmmaker based in Germany. And obviously, I'm a Sony user. As you might have seen, this is not the A6300, but it is kinda at the same time. It's the Sony A6500, and the only difference between these two cameras is the IBIS, the in-body stabilization of the sensor. So when we talk about the A6300, we also talk about the A6500, though the A6500 is slightly more expensive. So we focus more on the A6300 as a better budget version. A small, fast disclaimer, I bought all this gear by myself and I got not sponsored in any way. This camera was released in February 2016 and the model name confusion got even more complicated when Sony released the upgraded version of this model in 2019, the Sony A6400 and the Sony A6600. Although these are newer and more expensive ones, you could say they are just the same sensor packed in a different body with only a few improvements. But more to that later. So I used this camera for over 3 years now. Nearly every day for my client works, my travel trips and my personal use. I really tried to push this camera to its limit, but it nearly never did. It's a massive monster. It's nicely built, weather and dust sealed, and there were almost no conditions where I was afraid this camera would fail me. Sometimes when the hot summer sun is burning down on the camera, there are some problems, but there is a little trick, even this won't matter to you. I will come to this in a second. But first, let's start with the reasons why I bought this camera back then and why these reasons still remain in 2022, even in comparison to the newer models and competitors. The first and biggest reason is the 4K image quality. It's downsampled from 6K and it has such a sharp image. It's delicious how the 4K 24 or 25p still looks nowadays, even compared to newer models and other brands. The next big reason is the AF, the autofocus. It's pretty decent. It was one of the best autofocus systems when it came out, and it's still better than competitors like Panasonic and Fuji. And when it comes to autofocus, the most important thing is reliability. After years of use, I can say you can pretty much rely on this camera. But as always, better safe than sorry, and you should always double check it. A next big reason is the APS-C sensor. Yeah, it's no full frame and there's not this big depth of field like in full frame sensors. But APS-C gives you the advantage of cheaper lenses and also smaller lenses, like these two Sigma lenses. They're so small and so cheap, like 300 to 400 bucks for some prime Sigma lenses with 1.4 aperture. They have such a nice quality, they're smaller, lighter, and the image quality is awesome. Another big benefit from using APS-C sensors is the form factor. These two cameras are compared full frame versus APS-C, and you can see the A7 IV is much bigger than the A6500. And it's so good for traveling and personal use. You can easily drop this camera in a small bag with a small lens like this prime and go for a walk, go hiking. And compared to full frame cameras, this is a huge difference. It's so lightweight, you don't even know there's a camera in your backpack. And an APS-C sensor is closer to a cinema camera sensor like a Super 35. Additionally, you have 1.5 crop. This may sound not that good, but 1.5 crop is very good, especially when you're shooting outdoors, animals, weddings. You just get a little closer to your subject and this makes a huge difference most of the time. The next point, the A6300 has great hybrid abilities. It's still a great photography camera. Got it? Still, because you make stills when you do photography. Never mind. It's still a great photography camera with 24.2 megapixels and this is very good for hybrid shooting like weddings or travel trips when you need to make some pictures as well, or what usually happens when the client asks for some social media photos. The next point is slow-mo. The A6300 doesn't have 4K slow-mo. Okay, but it has 1080p 120 frames per second. It's nice having this ability to make some B-roll shots in slow-mo, and even some people say it's not the best quality. To improve the image quality of your 1080p slow-mo, I will link you a video up here or here how to do the best settings for your color profile in slow-mo. That really made a huge difference to the default settings, so take a look at it. And the most important reason why this camera is still good in 2022, it's the price. Man, I can get this camera new for 640 bucks with a kit lens or used for under 500 euros or dollars. And this is as a kit with batteries, a cage, lenses. Just search for a good deal. There are new cameras, so this one is going to be sold very often. Just keep your eyes open. If you even want a cheaper camera, you can take a look at the Canon T3i like in this video of mine. It's still a great beginner camera. It has no 4K, only Full HD, but it's so cheap for under $150 and you can't make anything wrong with it. It's the best camera to experiment with camera settings, with the workflow of DSLR, and to test out some of your skills. It's a filmmaking and photography camera, so take a look at it. Of course, there are also a few downsides, but most of them, also the newer models, have them. For example, the A6400 and the A6600 both don't have 4K slow-mo. They still have the bad Full HD slow-mo image quality, and there's still the overheating problem, which really does not appear often. But to really avoid overheating, I will give you this simple trick. Yes, that's all. Just flip the screen so the air can circulate under it, and that's exactly where the sensor sits. A little tricky might also be the battery life, and that's only better with the most expensive APC camera in this row, the A6600, which has larger batteries like the A74 or A73. To easily get rid of this problem, you can buy a handful of spare batteries, or you can build a cinema rig and power your bad boy with a V-mount or Sony NPF batteries. And I really recommend doing this because you get like one shooting day with 1 or 2 V-mount batteries. And there's 8-bit and 420 color space. If you're just starting out, that might not bother you that much, and if you never heard of this, just skip this point. And there are good news for all filmmakers who are out there and just want a nice B-cam. This camera is exactly for you. Just make it to your all-time gimbal cam. I used this camera for 1 year as my B-cam now, after I got my Sony A7S3, and it worked very well. But still, let's talk about the differences between this model and the newer ones like the A6400. The A6400 in Europe doesn't have the 30 minutes video time limit. That's nice if you need to shoot very long sessions. The A6400 also has better autofocus like IAF, and it has HLG color profiles and a better overheating. But you nearly have to pay double the price. For 900 bucks you can get it body only. So what is the conclusion for this little bad boy? I can tell you, this really is still an insane camera in 2022. And if you are on a budget or are looking for a nice B-cam, this is really for you. It's a power horse, it's weather sealed, you can just throw it in your backpack, and it's so small and lightweight. Of course there are Fuji and Panasonic, and you can get the X-T3 or the GH5, but they still cost a little bit more, and they don't have that upgrade like the Sony FX6 or FX9 if you want to upgrade later. So if you start with a Sony camera, you already have the lenses if you want to upgrade later on. So to sum it up shortly, this is the best filmmaking camera in 2022 for 500 bucks or less. I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you learned something, and if so, give me a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, press the dislike button twice. I will also link all the gear I use down in the description so you can find it easy. These are affiliate links, so if you buy something, clicking this link, I will get a small amount of money. I'm going to shoot the B-roll for this video now, and if you want to see more videos like this, or tutorials and lighting, cameras and audio, subscribe to my channel, and see you next time. Auf Wiedersehen.